Scientific breakthroughs often come from teamwork nowadays, and how do you think it is important in collaborations for astronomy? And what's your approach to fostering it?
A project like ZTF, it can't be done by one person. There's an idea. It requires tremendous different skills. You have to build a very complex piece of hardware. We built one of the world's largest CCD cameras. Large amount of algorithms, machine learning, and recently AI, and then a lot of astronomy knowledge. So, absolutely, teamwork, collaboration is key to these sorts of projects.
Yeah, I think like ZTF can like discover some new event very quickly, and it can inform like the scientists over the world and to observe that event together.
Yeah, so one of the things that we have done, which has been extremely helpful to our project, has been sort of curiously putting out the data. Now, old style is if I build a machine, then I want to use the data so I can write the paper, right? Yeah. That makes sense, because if you spend the machine, if you put in the money, why do you want to give data to you? Then you can write the paper and then I won't be writing. No, that's correct when you don't have much data. But this project produces so much data, we can't consume it ourselves. So there are two ways this project has succeeded for me. One is I call direct light. That is, we get the data, the team writes papers, makes discoveries, writes papers and all that. That is reflected light. That is, we put out the data, and then like you yourself have been a user of ZTF and someone else. So that is, people write papers and they credit us for the data. Yes, it is their papers, but if you wish to call it as, software, branding, okay, it's what I call the halo effect. That is, and it turns out for every paper the team has published, there are 4 or 5 papers the rest of the world has published. Yeah. So our influence is actually much bigger than ourselves. So it's a win-win situation.
As a physics graduate and a young researcher myself, I know that research can be full of challenges and setbacks. Was there moments when things didn't go well in your research? How did you overcome that challenge and stay motivated?
Yeah, well, most projects there'll always be some ups and downs. Okay, so I would say the biggest thing and the main thing is you should always be doing a project that you have full faith that you really want to do this. So then it's that conviction, that enthusiasm that'll keep you going through the downs. Okay. If you have doubts about the research project you're doing, I would say you shouldn't be doing it. If you have doubts about something where, maybe it looked interesting and then you start doing it and halfway through you say, well, I'm not really interested, it's better to quit that. But I don't mean you want to quit because it's tough. You want to quit because you're not convinced it is, and that's very hard, especially if you've done a project, gone 1/3 of the way, and then you say, oh, well, I don't want to, I invested so much time and money, now I should continue. And sometimes that's a bad idea. But otherwise, once you have the strong conviction, people do persist, and that's, ZTF on point. We thought we were ready to go. We took the whole camera to Palomar, and we were supposed to start observing, and then we discovered there's a problem inside the cryovac system, and we had to bring it back, which is very expensive, and we had to keep paying money to all these people, even though they're not doing anything in nominally, because we need them for it to actually work when it comes back. And it took a lot of money, and I was thinking, oh no, what to do? But then in the end, it all worked out.
Okay, so always trust yourself.
And have the confidence. If make sure that whatever you're doing, you know why you're doing it, and you're convinced you want to do it. It's important to get all that right before starting a project.
parents often encourage their children to pursue in some high-paid industry, such as medicines or business.
Yes.
Your family ever suggest a different path for you outside of astronomy?
Well, yes, this is very. I grew up in India, and this is very common.
Yeah.
It's different times. When I was growing up, either you're an engineer or a doctor,
Yeah.
and now maybe it's maybe it's still the same. And in India, there are these institutes called the IITs, which is Indian Institute of Technologies. They have a very big brand name. Parents, if they want to do engineering, you want to go there because if you have that degree, then you get better jobs. And yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. First of all, I was extremely lucky or fortunate, or maybe just instead of saying that, I should say my parents never put any pressure on us. We're a family of 4. I have 3 elder sisters, and I think my parents were actually quite ahead of their times. Okay, and they really wanted all my sisters to study and become professionals. And when it became very clear that I was sort of thinking more about research and less engineering, even though in the end I ended up going to an IIT, but I didn't choose engineering, I chose applied physics.
Physics, yeah.
And so I didn't have that problem. But I have had taken students from India who were scored very high, because the way you go to these places is if you score very high, you get into engineering, especially computer science or electrical, whichever is a fashionable thing. And then they've finished their degree, and then they discover that they had actually wasted their time because they wanted to be a research scientist. So then they apply to graduate school in the US to do a PhD into astronomy or into something, and which is a waste of time for everyone, okay? Because finally that young person has developed the confidence and courage to tell their parents, no, I'm not going to do what you have in mind, okay? And you can't stop me, especially if I get a scholarship to go to the US.
Yeah.
And I think we should stop that because especially now, you know, in East Asia, certainly, most certainly, and even India, this has risen, you know, Hong Kong and China, they're all very well-off places. And the parents should stop worrying about, oh, well, if it is engineer, doctor, or bust. No, you can make money many other ways.
Yeah, I agree. Like doing something you are interested in definitely can help you become more successful.
For sure, and the other converse is true. If you're doing something you're really not interested, you'll be unhappy.
Yeah.
Okay, and when you're mid 40, you say, I'm really not interested, but it's hard to then go back and learn things. It's a waste.
Yeah, true, that's true. And why do you think it's important for us to study astronomy?
I don't think it's important for us to study astronomy at all. I mean, my view is that it's important for each of us to live our life fullest, okay?
Yeah.
So let's say, you know, you want to go into the fine arts and you have, let's say you have some talent, well, you should do that. And the main difficulty is, will the society support you in your aspiration? Okay, you have to also be practical. Okay, so for example, in astronomy, I can tell you in the United States, for every 5 people who get a PhD in astronomy, only 1 has a permanent job or a long-term job. Okay, the other 4 have to find other things to do. So that's a risk you take. Okay, so
they have to change their path.
yes. So one of the things that many of astronomy trains, especially if you're doing observational work like in ZTF, they're very good in data science. So many people go into data science, into the industry of data science. And if you've done more theoretical work, you can go into maybe some government laboratory, you know, which is doing work that actually requires numerical analysis. Or you can go join a startup because you have some knowledge about a GPS or some coordinate system and so on.
I'm doing startup as well.
Okay, well, there you are. See you an example.
Yeah. And what skills or mindset do you believe students need to develop if they want to start a career in astronomy or science?
My view is that if you want to be in science, you really should know. I'm not you should really know mathematics very well, because I think mathematics is the language of science. Okay. It used to be for some subjects like biology, you didn't know how to, but finally biology has a theoretical biology, and I think it's, even biology, I think if you're going into, you know, the DNA business, it's getting more closely on where mathematics helps. Astronomy for sure. Okay?
Yeah.
So the main things you should know for doing astronomy is you should be absolutely well grounded in mathematics and in physics.
What is the key to success in reaching this point in your career?
I don't know, I'd say luck. No. I generally work very hard. And I would say there's one strength I have is I'm actually fairly analytical in my thinking. When I was young, every day, at the end of the day, I would step outside my body in some sort of a spiritual way. Or spiritual, I don't mean in a deep. That is, okay, step outside your ego and say, what are the things I did wrong today? I strongly believe that you can improve by analyzing yourself and saying what are the things you did wrong. And the first question to ask is wrong and not right, because my view is that most people are limited by ego, which makes them hard to say, oh, I did something stupid, wrong, I could have done better. If you can actually overcome that, then you say, oh, what are the things that, you know, I could have done better? What are things wrong? The next day, you don't make that mistake. Why? You make a new mistake. But eventually, as you get older, those mistakes have to go down, especially if you're fixing them. And I would say many people, or most people actually don't think analytically. They think a bit more with their heart than when they should always be thinking with their brain.
So keep correcting yourself and fixing the problem.
Absolutely, because we all have to learn by experience, right? I mean, when you're a child, the first time you touched a flame, even though it looked interesting, you got burnt, then you don't do that again. But there are many times later when we go on, you know, you made some mistake and you should not make that mistake again. Okay, the flame everyone remembers, but these other mistakes, so many of us keep making the same mistakes again and again and again.
So keep learning from the failures.
Yes.
What development do you see in the future of astronomy? As 2024 is the year of AI, do you think it will replace the scientists or just enhance the work we do?
The astronomy, biology, these are what I call as phenomenological branches of science. Astronomy is to explain the universe as it is. Biology is to explain the sort of life forms that we see that has emerged, okay, on this planet. I mean, I think this is probably similar in other planets too. That remains to be proven though. Nonetheless, these sciences have finally risen because these sciences really require data. Last century, I would say, was the century of physics, which is a very reductionist aspect of branch of science. But this century, I think, is all the phenomenological science, branches of science, which actually use data are flourishing, because we now know technology-wise to produce large amounts of data, with the ability to analyze the data. And now thanks to developments in math and computer science, machine learning, AI, we can in fact not use ourselves to analyze this data. We can actually harness algorithms and machines to analyze this data. So that's the reason why these two areas of science, biology and astronomy, are literally making great progress. You know, every day you can open the newspaper and say astronomers found something, and then some other part of the newspaper will say there's a new drug design, or biologists have found something else. So yeah, my view is that this is a nice congruence between data production and data consumption, because you can produce a large amount of data, but if you didn't have all these ways to analyze the data, what are we going to do with this data? So it's actually wonderful to see this nice resonance between data production and intelligent consumption of data.
Last question. If you could give one piece of advice to today's young generation, what would it be?
I would say the most important thing for a young person is to figure out who you are.
Yeah.
It's not easy because when we are young, we don't have much experience. We don't have many failures to inform us who we are. If you have a simple failure, let's say you decided you like singing, you went to a thing, maybe the teacher wasn't very good, you had a failure, you just go away. But so not every failure is immediately a failure. You have to understand, make sure it is a deep failure because it's very informative. And so you have to be guided by your failures and successes to maximize your ability to function. You want to minimize failures, build on your strengths, but it takes a lot of cycles of things to do before you understand that. Okay? And those who are adventurous and try to do various things when they're young in college and so on, actually that's what I'd advise. And then have confidence in yourself. Okay, I don't know how to teach people confidence. I've advised, I think 32 PhD students and mentored maybe 54 postdoctoral fellows. I've not learned what it takes to be confident and I don't know how to do that because for me, I was born with confidence, so I don't doubt myself. So it's very hard for me to understand why is not everyone very confident. But there must be some secret in learning to become confident, and that's very important to develop that early on.
Or try it out. We should.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your advice, and it is really happy to interview you.
Thank you.
Thank you.